All right, so today I'm going to talk about the allegations that surfaced about Senator Adam Schiff. He's a Democrat in California. And the allegations are that he may have misrepresented his primary residence in Maryland to secure favorable mortgage rates and tax exemptions, despite serving and voting in California. Now, if this seems familiar to you, that's because Letitia James, the Attorney General of the state of New York, is going through the same controversy where she allegedly lives in New York. Well, she doesn't allegedly live in New York. She does live in New York, but filled out some forms that said she was living in Virginia to get favorable mortgage rates. At least those are the allegations.
The Trump administration accuses Attorney General Letitia James of mortgage fraud. They allege in court documents that in 2023, James granted her power of attorney to make a Norfolk, Virginia property her principal residence, despite her actually living and serving as Attorney General in New York. They also allege she bought a 5-family property in Brooklyn in 2001 with a loan that is only available for homes with 4 units or less.
Now, we can't get lost on the irony of all this. See, Letitia James directly went after Trump for doing the exact same thing that she's accused of now. And Adam Schiff was a big cheerleader for this whole thing, and now he's caught up in the same type of fraud. Now, before we get into it, I need to make this key clarification that Adam Schiff has not been criminally charged, and there is no formal DOJ investigation that's been publicly stated or confirmed as of right now. So we are just looking at the publicly available information, and I'm letting you come to your own determination. All right, so here's a little background on Adam Schiff. Born in 1960 from Massachusetts. He has a BA from Stanford, and he graduated from Harvard Law School. Former U.S. Attorney in Los Angeles, California State Senator, U.S. House Representative, and now he is a U.S. Senator from the great state of California. Now, for those of you who don't know, he was the lead House manager or the lead prosecutor in President Trump's first impeachment trial. Now, let's get to the allegations on what's happening with this mortgage fraud piece. So before we jump into the facts, let me just give you a brief overview of mortgage fraud. Now, the most common type of mortgage fraud is known as occupancy fraud. Here's an example. A person buys 2 homes. One home they are going to live in, and the other home they're going to use to rent out to people. Now, in the home that you're actually going to live in, you get lower mortgage rates, you get less out-of-pocket costs, and you get a lower tax rate because you actually live in that home. But in the second home, you're going to pay the top mortgage rates, you're going to have higher out-of-pocket costs, and you're going to pay a higher tax rate because that's at the home you live in. It's an investment property. And the difference in rates can be very, very dramatic. For instance, if you're trying to mortgage a property and you're going to live in that property, you generally would only need to put 5% down in some instances. But if it's an investment property, you have to put down 20%, which is a lot more money than if you were actually going to live in the home. So that's why people choose to do occupancy fraud, because it allows them to put down less money and get a lot more benefits from the government. Now, occupancy fraud is a crime, and people go to jail for this all the time. Now, how does this relate to Adam Schiff? Well, I got to take you back to 2003, where Adam Schiff purchased some property in the state of Maryland while he was serving in Congress as a representative from the state of California. Now, from the year 2009 to 2012, Schiff refinanced his mortgage and then indicated that his primary residence was in Maryland. Now, let me step back for a second, because you can only have one primary residence. And the primary residence is someplace that you intend to return to, you live most of the year, you vote from, that's where your kids go to school from. That's your primary residence. And there are a lot of tax benefits for whatever property that you're actually living in that you claim to be your primary residence, as I spoke about before. Now, because you can only have one primary residence, the issue that Schiff ran up against is that he was claiming that his primary residence was in Maryland when it came to the mortgage documents. But then he's also claiming that his primary residence is in California because he's a California state representative. And there were some really good benefits to doing this. For instance, the California home got a $7,000 reduction in his property taxes because Schiff was saying, hey, I'm my primary resident of the state of California. But at the same time, he's also claiming the homestead exemption in Maryland, claiming that that's his primary residence and getting those tax deductions from the state of Maryland. Now, Schiff's spokesman stated that he listed both his California and Maryland addresses as his primary residence for loan purposes to distinguish them from vacation properties, asserting that both properties were occupied throughout the year. Now, in 2020, Schiff refinanced his mortgage again, but this time he indicated that the Maryland house wasn't his primary residence, it was his second home. Now, when asked about this discrepancy between his primary residence being in Maryland or in California, here's how Schiff explains it.
Schiff's campaign has said he has been open about relocating and raising his family in Maryland as he works in D.C. We asked him about all of this. Take a listen.
I think just about every member of Congress has a residence in their state and a residence back in D.C. since we're in session much of the week. And people make a family decision where they're going to have their kids. But our principal residence, our primary residence is in California. It always has been and always will be.
I guess raising your children in Maryland and just having a larger home in Maryland and maybe having a community out there, I guess, how will you respond to your opponents or your critics who might wonder if you really understand the California experience if you're having all of that in another state?
I think it's honestly a non-issue. Members of Congress all have a residence on both coasts, and they make a decision based on how far away the capital is and the age of their kids, where they'll get to see most of their kids, and it's really as simple as that.
Now, Schiff isn't the only California senator who had to go through this. Recently, Senator Butler was forced to re-register to vote in California after it was revealed that she too had claimed a Maryland residency at the time of her appointment. So if you're living in Maryland, you can't be senator for the state of California.
Why can LaFonza Butler be the next U.S. senator from California when she lives in Maryland? Well, it's simple. You only need to be a registered voter in the state you're serving in, and we understand she's already done that.
Now, I always find it fascinating that the people who put these crazy policies in place don't live in those places where those policies take effect. For instance, like the no bail policy, or even the we can let people steal whatever they want out of the stores and not hold anybody accountable policy. Those light on crime policies make those places undesirable to live. So undesirable that they're fleeing. Even their senators don't live in the state they represent, which to me is crazy. But I think it also shows you that it's easy to talk the talk, but when you got to actually walk the walk by living in under your own policies, those who can move, move. That's why Schiff is living in an $800,000 home in Maryland. That's why this woman is living in Maryland. She does have a home in California, but she's living in Maryland. Now, let me circle back to Adam Schiff because, see, to qualify for the homeowner's exemption, which means California is your primary resident, this is what the law says. It says the dwelling must be an individual's true, fixed, and permanent home and principal establishment to which he or she, whenever absent, intends to return. Factors used to determine residency include in-state presence, vehicle registration, voter registration, bank account, and state income tax filings. Now, Schiff makes all of this confusing because, even when he voted, here is something he posted on Twitter saying, hey, California, Los Angeles, voters are voting. He has his I voted button on, but he's in front of the Maryland House. Now, despite the mounting evidence that suggests that Schiff's primary residence is in Maryland, his campaign spokesman told CNN that they are adamant that Schiff's primary residence is in Burbank, California. So that's all the evidence. Do you believe that Schiff lives in an 800,300 square foot house in Maryland? Or do you think he lives in a 650 square foot co-op or condo in Burbank, California? And remember, where he lives, where he works, where his kids live, where his family lives, all of that happens in Maryland. But also understand he is just in Maryland right now because he is working as he was a congressman first and a senator now. So, and what about the other senator? Now, she obviously, there's no evidence that she did anything with the mortgages or anything, but she was living in Maryland too. It seems like all of California senators are actually senators from Maryland. Maryland has 4 U.S. senators, it sounds like, because that's where the California senators are living and that's where the Maryland senators are living. But let me know how you feel in the comment section. Do you think Adam Schiff's situation is very similar to Letitia James, where everywhere he buys a house is his primary residence when you can only have one? It's all confusing, but he's a U.S. senator from there now, so right now it doesn't look like he has a problem, and no one's really looking into it, so we'll just have to wait and see. But if you like this type of content, don't forget to like, share, subscribe to look at YouTube stuff. My name is Nate the Lawyer, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.